Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me again. Some of you I saw earlier this week. Some of you I haven't seen since this spring. So just a quick introduction again. My name is Christina Spector. I am the new Marge Reesan. I know she's missed dearly. And I work on the special education team at DPI. And I gave my friends, I'm sorry, I'm a former elementary school teacher, so you guys are my friends. I can't help it. I gave everyone on Tuesday a little bit of background, no, it was Monday maybe? No, it was Tuesday, about DPI and how it's organized and how there are 6 different divisions and everyone kind of holds a different piece of the puzzle. So I think that's really important context for you to know. While, yes, I do work at DPI, I am not an expert on accountability, I'm not an expert on assessment, but I can find people who are for you. And that's kind of the role that I serve as the liaison, okay? So sometimes it takes a little while to get an answer, but I will always work on it, and I will always answer the phone when I'm in the office. So I primarily work in special education on compliance. I do complaint investigations is another hat that I wear. And I wear a lot of different varieties of hats. So if any of you want to talk about that later, I would transportation is something that I work on. Special education transportation. Lots of different things here and there. So that's kind of my little introduction. So before I get into the presentation, and I don't think it'll probably take about an hour, so we might have some extra time here. I wanted to thank those of you who are currently on the roster. I sent an email out about a month. And it's so funny that Greg was talking about you all determining what's helpful to you. I sent an email to the current roster saying, what would you like me to talk about in your updates? So a lot of these things are going to hit on those topics. I know that when I came to speak in the spring, I shared a resource that you all prompted me to create about what's the difference between open enrollment, what is special needs scholarship, what is tuition agreements, cooperative agreements. I created that table. Is this sounding familiar to you guys? Is it reminding you of something? Okay, so the beauty of that table is I've actually shared it internally with my team because we get a ton of questions about these things. And so it's really been a resource for them as well. So a lot of the things that you bring to the table not only serve your group, but serve a larger picture. So please continue to give me input, continue to tell me what you need. I really want to serve that role for you, okay? So, piggybacking on, remember when I gave you that table and it had all that wonderful contact information? And I said, this is for internal use only because this stuff is going to change and I can't possibly update it all the time? Well, here's your first change. Just since this past spring, we have had a lot of new staff. Staff has shifted and changed. And so in my best effort to keep on top of this, these are the new contact people for those programs that we discussed in the spring. So the Special Needs Scholarship Program, SNSP, the contact information for there, and you have this in your slides, so don't feel like you need to write it down, but I wanted you to know, is a wonderful gentleman named Nico Mitnott. He actually used to be on the special education team, so he's really knowledgeable about special ed. And then we're so lucky at DPI to occasionally get wonderful superintendents who come to us at the end of their careers. So we recently hired someone named Roger Cordes, who's on a different team, who came from, he was the superintendent in Mineral Point and somewhere else, which, interestingly, I am also very distantly related to, we found out. He's the twin brother of my step-aunt. Put that together. So we went for a walk, and so he's not on my team. I don't normally commonly interact with school financial services, but I am the kind of person that likes to network and meet other people. So this is a resource for you to know who these people are, and I shared it with my team as well. And then finally, the cooperative agreements that we talked about. So I guess the one thing I want to reemphasize again, tuition agreements are for individual kids between districts. Districts make a plan to serve individual kids, and that's what the tuition agreement is, right? That's Roger's area. Cooperative agreements are about entire programs that districts are going to work together on. So let's say there's no EBD program in a really small school district. 2 districts could enter into a cooperative agreement to share those services. And that would be Bruce Anderson's area. These are all statutorily prescribed, But I just wanted to give you a little update because I felt like it was really unfair for me to give you this information in March and then not follow up on it. So that's an assignment change that's happened on two different teams. Yeah?
So will you give us a couple sentences on special needs scholarship program?
Yeah, and we're going to get into that a little bit more when we talk about the budget. But yes, in general, no, this is a great question. Special Needs Scholarship Program is a new voucher program, okay, that was created for kids with disabilities to attend private schools. And if you look back at that table, or Jan can send it to you electronically, there's more information.
I will send it out to everybody again, including the newer people here, so that you have it. But go ahead and talk.
Yeah. So it's a program, a voucher program, where kids who specifically qualified for IEPs at some point could attend private schools with public money following them. Great question. And it's, of course, been tweaked in the latest budget. Any questions about assignment changes? All right. That was relatively easy. See, I have my binder with me because I am not an expert on a lot of these things, but I'm just the messenger. So, on our special education team, these are the people I work with every day. This is a team of about 40 people. We do have some changes that I thought you might just want to know their names. Ethan Severson is our new office operations associate. So he took the place of someone named Jim Verbick. I don't know if that name sounds familiar to any of you. And Ethan does all of our website stuff. And he is awesome. He's great.
Is he the one who fixed that link?
He is.
So we had people were calling and saying they were clicking on a link from the DPI webpage for the request for mediation forms, like district people, and it wasn't working. And so Ethan fixed it.
Yep. He's great. Super tech savvy. It's so nice to have those people. Molly Beaver was our intellectual disabilities consultant. So we have some program area folks who focus on certain disability categories and worked with those kids, have that background, have a lot of contacts and knowledge base. So Molly worked with kids with intellectual disabilities and on a lot of our alternate standards and alternate assessment programs for kids with the most significant cognitive disabilities. She actually went back to the classroom. She's teaching kids again. She really missed working with kids. So she's not there right now. So if you know of any rock stars who work with kids with intellectual disabilities, tell them that position is open and posted right now. And then finally, our special ed team data consultant, Amy Owen, who had only been with us for about a year or so, is leaving our team as well. So if you know of any rock star data analysts that you want to send our way, please do that. Amy actually is taking a job working with the Race to Inequity report. You know what I'm talking about? That Dane County report that came out? Yes. I don't know. I keep getting Race to the Top mixed up with the yeah, I don't remember what it was called. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? That thing that came out in Dane County a couple years ago that was awful about the state of our different racial categories in Madison and the disparities. She's going to work on that project. Yeah, so it's good to have smart people in other places. But yes, not Race to Inequity. Not excited about that. So, any questions about special ed team changes? Maybe this isn't useful, but sometimes it's good to know names. Okay, so let's get into the first topic in which I have zero background, but I have a good friend named Amy Marsman who filled me in. She works on the OSA team, which is the Office of Student Assessment. And this stuff actually was just in the news this week, so it's super timely. It's accountability season, you guys, yay! Report cards on districts and schools, and testing results. So you'll notice there's a bunch of blue underlined things here. If you want this PowerPoint and electronic version to take you straight to where that stuff is on our website, we can email it to you because I'm all about hyperlinking straight to useful information. But we have a bunch of information on our website about this stuff. Schools and districts are accessing their preliminary report cards through the Secure Data website right now. It's called WISE-Secure. So they go in and they look at their data. And then they do this, I don't even remember what it's called, data inquiry phase, where if they see something that looks really crazy, they call our office and they figure it out. So they have a couple weeks to do that process. So that's starting now, and you might hear about that from districts a little bit. As you can imagine, school report cards and district report cards are a really political issue, and it gets a lot of attention, and it can be kind of a big stressor for folks. So I wanted you to be aware that that's going on right now, okay?
I might have missed it, but is it publicly available on your website?
It will be, it is not yet. Yeah, let me go through this list here. They have a few weeks to review. Public report cards will be available on the report card homepage, which is the first hyperlink that I gave you on here, in late October and early November. And Amy and I went for a walk yesterday, and she said more like early November. Yeah.
So what are they reporting to the district?
They have to give them statutorily a report card on a bunch of different things that the legislature says they have to report on. So the things that I know about are like, how many kids with disabilities? How are they doing? It's a really complicated math score involving student growth. It's actually, we have data people at DPI, and then there's also people from the UW-Madison. I forget what the name of the group is that helps with the growth, because there's a growth measure as well. There's a measurement about participation in tests. Who's participating? Do you have enough people participating? What's your attendance level? What's your attendance rate? It's a really complicated.
So it's not subjective, it's all based off of analysis?
Well, that's a matter of opinion. That's a matter of opinion. It's a political question.
It's not statistical information necessarily.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Is that where they report
Depends on what you think is important, though. Sorry.
suspension, expulsion, graduation rates?
They have graduation rates on the report card. I don't know if they have suspensions and expulsions. I can't remember. Does anyone know off the top of their heads? You think so?
Isn't it like the ratio of teachers per students per teacher?
Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of stuff, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's relatively new.
Yep, within the last few years.
Yes, and so it's still controversial.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It is quite controversial. That's a really good way of putting it. There is a report card summary, which is 1 page. And then there's the detailed report cards, which if you're really interested, Tom, in the data, you could really dig into. It's 15 pages long. So you can look at the summary and you can look at the detail if you want. There is some statistics involved, but there's always some politics that are layered behind this stuff. There's going to be some changes to the report card coming up. I don't know anything about this, but I'm reading Amy's words. Test participation will be removed from scoring, meaning that districts will no longer get deductions, but it will still be reported by subgroup, including students with disabilities. That's a subgroup that get reported on. And then there will be important differences next year coming with the federal accountability system, which will treat test participation differently than in the past. So we have our state report cards, but then there's also, under the Every Student Succeeds Act, some federal accountability as well. So we do a federal accountability and we do a state accountability. So this is complicated stuff. There's also going to be some changes to a score that's called value added, which is it's related to that student growth score I was talking about. And there are tons of resources. There's a timeline available on our website, which this hyperlink would take you to if you're curious about like more questions about when is this affecting schools and when will schools be able to get this stuff. And so you could click on that link for that. And then if you just need more information about accountability, report cards, testing, that would be the last hyperlink. But I love the questions that you guys are asking. Are there any more questions about that you can ask the non-expert about accountability? Some things in life we also just kind of are like, that's not super interesting to me, so I'm not going to learn that. Speaking on that topic, slightly, state budget stuff just came out. And it was literally signed by our governor, Governor Scott Walker, on Thursday, which was incidentally the same day that State Superintendent Tony Evers gave his State of Education speech. So timing is interesting, right? But very, very recent. just signed, like I said, on Thursday. So our policy and budget team, we have a whole team of people who do nothing but analyze this stuff and track bills. They're reviewing it right now. And if you see, I was actually looking at their website every day this week, seeing if their analysis was out yet to be able to use it with you guys, and it isn't. But if you click on that latest budget analysis hyperlink, it'll take you to the page that'll walk through all of those things. But lucky for me, I know the head of the policy and budget team, and I asked her to give me kind of a 10,000-foot view, which I'm happy to share with you guys if you'd like. Yes? Yes. This came from a question that people were asking, so that's why it's here. So the bill is called 2017 Act 59. You hear about Act 10 a lot, right? That was the budget bill for that year. This year it's Act 59. And as always, when you think of the state budget, you think, oh, it's going to be about money, right? It's just going to be about money. No. There's money and then there's policy that's always thrown into the state budget. So those are the two areas that I can talk about a little bit. So we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday. The state categorical aids remain the same for special education, but that I talked a little bit about that special fund that also we have at the state and federal level called the high cost fund. And that's the cost where if you have a special ed student, a kid who qualifies under IDEA, who's considered a high cost student, meaning their services and all of the things that they need as part of their IEP cost more than $30,000, you can apply for this high cost additional aid. Now, is it reimbursed 100%? Absolutely not, right? You get a percentage, but depending on how many people also apply across the state for the same fund. But the budget did increase this funding by $739,000 in fiscal year 18 and $853,800 in fiscal year 18. Both of them, this is based off of an $8.5 million base, and these are all estimates right now. And the eligible claims will go up as well. It's hoping that it'll be 90% versus 70% right now, so going up in what you can get reimbursed. So that's good news. There's also a new special education transition incentive grant.
Before you go on.
Yeah.
So with this high cost fund, and I'm trying to process the data that you just gave us about the percentage goal that they're hoping to reimburse. So it seems that implies that for each high cost special education student, a school district actually does receive some assistance.
Yes, they do.
For all of them in Wisconsin. We're not at a point where we don't have enough money to provide some reimbursement for a high cost student.
We give some reimbursement for high cost students. Yes,
All right.
across the state.
So the thing that varies is the percentage of the cost of their education.
And it's just stuff above 30,000.
Okay, and so you don't know if you're gonna get 75% reimbursed or 90% reimbursed until some future point in time. Is
When
that
you
the-
see how many people actually apply for it. Yep,
At the end of a fiscal year?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not totally crystal clear on that because this isn't my area of expertise. But what happens is everyone applies who would actually, you have to go through the year to see how much expenditures you actually have.
Yes, and you don't know.
Right. It's an unknown thing.
All right.
And then if you have, 5,000 high-cost kids that magically move to Florida or whatever, it can change depending on the year and the demographics of the kids.
I think it's also important to remember, and as Christina said, the categorical aids have not changed, which means that the first $30,000, the districts only get 27 cents per dollar.
I'm sorry, the district only gets 27%.
Cents per dollar. The first 30,000 are reimbursed at 27%.
Yeah, thank you. Very
So
important
that's
point.
a very important.
Yep.
Budgetary issue.
Yep, definitely. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of politics going on behind the scenes, right? On all of this.
So if a private school gets a scholarship, can they also apply for the high?
That's an excellent question. I do not think so, but I do not know for sure. Do you know?
12,000 is supposed to cover that.
The 12 is supposed to cover that. Okay. Yes.
Maybe based on this, the scholarship students or also, students who go to private schools and get the scholarships. And then they come back to the public school.
Mhm.
Does that money come back as public school?
That's a
or
great
does the
question.
Third Friday counts still determine?
We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday.
That's happened.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yep, because as some of you know, I shouldn't say all of you know, when you go from a public school to a private school, your qualification under certain laws changes, right? So what you're saying is that some folks will go to a private school and then maybe it doesn't work out so well, or they didn't realize what they were losing, maybe. Or the school kicked them out. Yep, that can happen too, because private schools have different rules than public schools. And then they return to the public school system. So what I've been told, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but what I've been told is that there are 2 counts done during the year of these kiddos, because we had exactly that concern, is what about after the 3rd Friday? Because that's the count that's done of all students and where they are at that moment and what aid payments are based on usually, some aid payments. Our financial services team also now does a spring count, and they will make adjustments based on semester.
Is it 100% or?
I don't know. I'm assuming it's prorated based on how long, like they do a count based on semester. So if you get $12,000 and the kid's there for the first half, they get 6, and then, you know what I'm saying? They get aided. They adjust it at semester, just 2 times a year. Mm-hmm.
Which, and I'm not sure exactly when that went into place. A good friend of mine was a MPS administrator, and there was a lot of that going on. And a lot of so the private schools would keep the child until after count,
Oh, yeah.
and then kick them out. And the MPS got nothing because all the funds were based on it. Rich is shaking his head there.
But you know what, Christina, maybe you could just talk for a minute for some people in the room about the FAPE responsibilities
Sure.
of public school versus private school, just real quickly, because some
Yeah.
jobs.
Yeah. So really quickly, overall, FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education, applies to students who are enrolled in public school only. Free Appropriate Public Education does not apply to students who are enrolled in private schools by their parents, okay? Sometimes kids, very rarely, can be placed in private schools by their district or by their IEP team, and then FAPE transfers. But if they are placed through special needs scholarship program or through any other program like that, if they're placed in a private school, they lose that right. They have other rights, right? They still have the right to a services plan, which is pretty limited, I will say. But overall, that's a pretty big procedural protection that they've given up, as well as substantive in terms of an IEP. They don't have an IEP anymore in most cases.
Right, we don't mediate service plans, but we do end up doing a lot of mediations for students who are going back to the public school.
Yeah.
Or even if if students are being homeschooled,
Same
we
thing.
don't mediate those cases unless it's about getting the child back in the public school. What is that going to look like?
Yeah, really important perspective, thank you. Really good to know. Yeah, because in Wisconsin, homeschool students, similarly to private school students, don't have a right to FAPE. They might have a right to a services plan, but again, that's very limited, based on a dollar amount and based on a consultation model.
Right, so we don't mediate 504 plans, service plans, or
Homeschool.
homeschool students. Any questions about that?
Wisconsin has a lot of different choice options, and we actually were one of the we were the first. Milwaukee was the first voucher program in the country, I believe. So we just have a lot of stuff to keep in your minds that can all be going on in the background.
But we do mediate charter schools because a lot of those are under the umbrella of public schools. But I know I help you with all that information, but I just want to make that clear up front.
Lots of different kinds of schools here. Yeah.
Do the school districts receive federal and state special ed funds for students placed by their parents in private schools?
No. However, they do have to reserve a certain amount, a certain percentage of their federal special ed funds to spend on those kids, which is what a services plan is all about. It's a small amount. Yes.
We do get the scholarship. I mean,
Yes, he was asking me about do we get money? Right?
Does the local school receive federal, state, special ed funds?
Can they count them for enrollment?
In terms of the IDA, the district has to count all of the student disability within its jurisdiction, and that includes students who are raised by their parents in the private school. So when the district receives their IDA dollars, it is based on all students. So they have to designate, let's say 15 kids were in the private school, they have to allocate that much money for the speech therapist, for example, to provide services, in addition to the 12,000 that each kid gets. So the district are getting it.
So I'm sorry, my answer was not entirely correct to you. They are counted in child count. Thank you, Nisan. I'm so glad you're here. Any other questions about that? So we've talked a little bit about the money. There's a couple new incentive programs related to students with special education needs. There's a transition readiness grant. There's the transition grant incentive, right? Those are new grant programs you might hear about. They are smaller than DPI asked for. Okay, that's important to know. In terms of policy, and I'm just going to read this because I'm no expert on this, related to special education open enrollment, beginning with payments in fiscal year 2020, so that's the next biennium. So this is down the road a little bit, okay? But no, this was in the budget, so it was signed, and this is what everyone is going to live with in a few years. The transfer amount was currently at $12,000. Nisan alluded to that, a flat rate, which was in the last budget. It may be based on actual cost of providing the pupil with a free appropriate education in the prior year if the non-resident district has submitted a financial statement to DPI demonstrating this cost. But my friend said, we have to forward the financial statement to the pupil's district of residence. However, DPI does not have authority, and neither does the resident district, to question, verify, or deny the cost of the financial statement.
Pretty frightening.
The reality of it,
Information, and that's it, you have to take it. You have to believe it. That's
Yes,
it.
Tom?
isn't the reality of it that in fiscal 2020?
They might kick it down.
Unless it's put in that budget.
Yep, they might kick it down. Yep, but we just wanted you to know that. And it could only equal to up to $30,000, which again is that high cost number kind of kicking in the politics again, right? Only equal to $30,000. It does not bring back the residence district ability to deny open enrollment placement based on undue financial burden. Remember, there used to be this thing where the resident district could say, no, we're not going to allow you to open enroll in that other district because it's too expensive, undue financial burden. It didn't start that again. There's been some conversation about that, but they still can't deny those based on undue financial burden. We're really in the weeds. I'm sorry, guys. If you know I'm reading, then you know we're really in the weeds. And if no financial statement was provided to DPI, then the transfer amount is the same as the statutorily prescribed per pupil payment amount. And we have estimates on that. They're all around $12,000-ish. So some changes to open enrollment, which our very smart people at DPI will figure out. But just know. And it's also the same, you know how I just talked about open enrollment, right? That's when you go to a different district than you live in. It's the same changes for the special needs scholarship program, the private school attendance. Okay, same thing where beginning in the next biennium, it could be based on the actual costs up to $30,000 based on this financial statement that we have no authority to question, verify, or deny. Okay? So just know that that's going on. Politics, guys. Politics around everything that we do. Questions, comments that other people want to say that I can't say?
That's on camera.
I said nothing. All right.
So, just so that I'm clear, I understand that the beginning of that language was in the future biennium.
Yep.
Okay. So, for the current biennium, if a parent does want to move their special education student to another district,
The current rules that I talked about in the spring still apply.
okay, so, but please say what generally, can that be denied? Can a school district that where, the whole
There's
school
certain-
district deny?
Well, I wouldn't say deny, but there's certain requirements to participate in the program. And I don't remember them off the top of my head. I'm going to defer to Jane to send out that handout again. They'll talk about those things.
So, okay, so the answer is sometimes.
I don't know that they can deny it, but they might not qualify for the program. You have to meet certain requirements to qualify for the program. One of them is which you attended the public school the last year. Okay, so there's certain requirements to participate in the current special needs scholarship program. But again, I am no expert. Nika was the expert. I just dabble. I know enough to be dangerous. So a couple other things in the budget that she wanted me to point out. The budget bill provides for state reimbursement to private schools for the actual costs that exceed the amount, I don't understand what this means, deducted from the pupil's resident school district at a rate of 90% of the costs. Do you know what that means? I don't know what that means.
For the private school.
Yes. I mean, that I get. That I get. Yeah. From the existing sum sufficient appropriation. I don't know. And then, I'm not sure, she doesn't say if this is now or I'm assuming this is now because it doesn't say fiscal year 20. The budget bill removes 2 existing eligibility criteria to participate in special needs scholarship program: prior year attendance at a public school, gone, and prior year application and subsequent denial under the open enrollment program to attend a non-resident district. Remember, those were the 2 big gateway things to participate in the special needs scholarship program. You had to have attended a public school last year, and you had to have been denied open enrollment to a different district. So those are gone.
And did you say that?
As I say with a smile on my face.
State reimbursement will be made of the cost of special education to a student in a private school?
State reimbursement for the actual costs that exceed the amount deducted from the pupil's resident district. I don't know any more, like I can't analyze, that doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
I would need to talk to someone about it.
Is the 12,000 being deducted, because,
Yes,
right, and then,
Yep.
on top of that, the private school gets up to 90% of the difference between 12,000
And what they actually-
and their costs, and what they charge tuition. Let's say it's $20,000, so it's 90% of the 8,000 difference.
that's what it
Yeah.
seems like.
Good for the private school.
That's what it seems like.
Interesting. So,
But the public school doesn't necessarily get that.
What's the private school?
Right. The public school has to wait till the end of the fiscal year to find out
Correct.
how much they'll get reimbursed. And it's not promised at 90%.
Between 70 and 90, right.
Yeah.
Did you guys have a question over
So
here?
I don't wanna email the information since it's now changed, so who can I email it to review it before I send it out again? To take out those 2 changes and just make sure it's accurate.
You can send it to me and we can do our best.
Okay.
This is hot off the presses. It was just signed on Thursday. Most people don't even have this information yet, so it will be a while until they can analyze it, they know how they're gonna implement it. So it might be a while, okay? But there's a reason why I said in spring
Yeah.
that this is a moment in time and I'm not gonna be able to continue to update this again because, we can work together to find an expert that can help you guys analyze that. I am not that
Or just
person.
maybe take out those 2 pieces that you just mentioned, the 2
Yeah.
requirements.
It must be in there. I can't remember though.
So they can get that money without providing the level of services of the public school.
They are not legally responsible for providing FAPE.
So they can get the money and not provide provide the level of services that the public school has to?
It depends on the individual kid. I don't want to make a blanket statement, but they do not have to provide FAPE. What they work out with the parents informally is another question entirely.
There's no requirement
There's no requirement
that they
for providing
no
FAPE.
requirement that they provide the level of services.
There's no
The
re-
public school has to provide.
There's no legal requirement for FAPE, yes.
So does it, do the parents ever get a handout at some point that says,
Yes.
you're taking your kid out of the school and we're not gonna have, and
Yes.
moving them, so you need to know? Because sometimes I get parents that are very confused about, like, they move their kid and they're like, I didn't know that they weren't gonna get services,
Yeah.
which they probably didn't read something maybe,
Right.
or it was confusing to them, but can you just talk about that? Because that would be something we'd see in mediation.
Yeah, so there is a handout, right? Can other people in this room who experienced this help me? There's a handout that we have to post on our website, that districts have to post on their website, right? That say something about, these are your rights if you go to private school, these are your rights if you don't. And I do think they have to hand it to the parent too at some point. I'm looking at Renee, she's shaking her head. But again, special needs scholarship, not my sauce. I'm happy to take questions back and ask Nico.
I think that the way that it works with open enrollment, charter schools, private schools, parentally placed private student, I mean, it's very complex, and so just it's something that I think that we have seen, but we typically are able to resolve that in mediation without our mediator having to know
All of these details.
all of those details, because it's really very
Very
detailed. So I
specific.
just think that it's not, it's good to have like a general overview, but
Mhm.
I don't know that we've ever relied on our mediator to have any idea about those details.
And that special needs scholarship was so new, and it cut so many people out of the gate with those first two provisions.
Mhm.
You said that really, I didn't really deal with it. I don't know where
Right, no.
you did.
I think there were less than 3,000 kids statewide that even used it. So we're way in the weeds. For those of you that are new, we're way in the weeds because people were interested, but you are not required to be the
No,
expert.
it's just good to know about it.
Yeah,
It exists,
absolutely.
that's all.
And you have resources to tap into if you need to. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your perspective. All right, so another area that I know very little about, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because you guys asked, was licensing. And so there were some pretty major changes to licensing in the budget. Does anyone know one of them? Yes. Thank you, Maura. Yes, lifetime licenses was a big thing that was signed into law. So my grandmother had a lifetime license. You have a lifetime license? I had a professional license. I had an initial, then a professional. Now I have a lifetime license too, just like my grandma. So what this means, and there's a lot of political feelings about this. I'm not going to talk about that. If you guys want to, that's fine. But anybody that holds a current professional license or a master teacher license, so those are our nationally certified teachers, nationally board certified, they will automatically have their licenses converted to a lifetime license. DPI will remove the expiration date from these licenses, and there will be no fee charged when the license holder converts to a lifetime license. So I just renewed my 5-year license in May. I'm relieved to hear that I don't have to pay again to convert to a lifetime license. Okay. They're working with their programmers to do this. Anybody that holds an initial license, which is a new teacher, right out of a program, will have their license converted to a 3-year provisional license. And then after 6 semesters, with the approval and signature of their school board, they can apply for a lifetime license. 6 semesters, yep. A lifetime license will be invalidated if the educator is not actively employed by a district for 5 or more consecutive years, or if they fail to log into the online system and submit to a background check and pay the fee for the background check.
So who won't have a lifetime license?
If I don't teach in a district for 5 years
Right.
and don't do a background check, they will take my lifetime license away.
Okay, and the only other one is the 3-year license?
The initial.
So
Mhm.
everybody that's teaching now,
Mhm.
that have been teaching for more than 3 years gets a lifetime license?
Yes. Yes.
But are you in jeopardy of losing your license because you're not teaching?
Me personally, yes.
Yeah, all
If
right.
I don't submit to the background check.
Oh. What about if you don't teach in 5 years? Yeah.
You can either teach or submit to the background
Okay,
check.
so it's an or.
It's an or, which I was relieved to see. That's new, because for a while it was not an or.
So what does a background
Personally.
check mean?
Um,
Background that they-
They look at like the FBI, they send it to the Department of Justice and they do the FBI thing.
Yeah,
The fingerprinting stuff.
I see.
Yeah.
Numerous exclusions.
Yeah. There's also a 3-year teaching license with stipulations. So if a district wants to train their own people, if they already hold an initial or professional license and they're an employee, they can get a 3-year teaching license with stipulations. And also the budget allowed school boards to hire IHE faculty members who are not DPI licensed to teach at public high schools if they are in good standing at their IHE and pass a background check that DPI has to do. See some confused looks on your face. Did you understand my words?
No.
College, university faculty. Someone that works for an Institute of Higher Education. Sorry, I said it because I couldn't remember the words. All right. Then there's also this, and this information I just got off the licensing news blog. So you can see that hyperlink right there. If Jane sends that out to you, you can click on that and it will take you to a blog where we're putting out stuff as quickly as possible on the changes to licensing. So I actually found out all that stuff about the life license last night on the blog. It's very up to date. Then there's also this other group that's working on licensing issues. Were you on that group, Lisan? I know there were WCAS professionals. There's the state superintendent's working group on school staffing issues, and that was a group that he convened to try to, that Superintendent Tony Evers convened to try to make improvements to our PI system in order to provide some flexibility to cover teaching shortage. Teaching shortage is a thing happening in Wisconsin. So that might impact your work a little bit too. And then a whole bunch of other in the weeds stuff. Do you want to hear the in the weeds stuff? The in the weeds stuff. Yes, in the swamp. Carolyn, we can talk more about it, but there's a retirement license. Have you guys heard about this? This is a new thing that this group did. So the superintendent's working group actually did this outside of the budget. Anyone over the age of 55 by July 1st, 2017 could renew without a professional development plan or 6 credits, which is kind of moot now because we have life licenses. But anyway, back
You
then.
don't have to take credits if you have a life license?
Not unless your district requires it.
Oh, if the district requires it,
You might have to.
you have to, but it doesn't affect your teaching license, does it?
It's about, yeah, that would be more about employment. Mhm.
So the district could say, well, you haven't fulfilled your professional development, we're not going to employ you anymore, but that doesn't negate your lifetime teaching license.
Right. Yep.
I understand that.
Yep, you do. There was some work about using educator effectiveness to renew their license through that process, but again, some of this stuff is kind of irrelevant now, right? There's some work done. They renamed there's no such thing as an emergency license, if you guys ever heard about that. It now has a new name. It's called a 1-year license with stipulations. It used to be just for people coming from outside of Wisconsin who had to take tests. However, it is much more broad now.
Christina, can I just jump in here for a second?
Yeah.
We get a lot of requests for mediation where parents will claim that an unlicensed person has been providing services for their child, not understanding the emergency license or the temporary license or whatever. And again, we don't have to be experts on that, just need to know that there can be a situation where there's some misunderstanding about how this teacher is licensed.
Right, I had one yesterday, and that, there was an idea complaint, and DPI said this was an okay license.
So the whole issue of certified, certifiable, et cetera, that, all those situations still exist. In other words, you have to be certified.
You have to be
Teach
licensed.
this particular course, or you can be certifiable, all that, all the loosey-goosey stuff. So those still are in play.
You still have to be licensed, yes. Yes.
You don't get a general teaching.
Mhm. Let's see. That you don't need to know. Special education licenses with stipulations can only last 3 years. Okay, that's what I was told. And something important to note, actually related to Tom's question exactly, was in both the budget and the working group, there is a desire to move away from developmental levels down the road. So instead of, right now we have a lot of different licenses, early to middle childhood, middle to adolescence, all that. The desire is to loosen that so that there would be more of a K-12 special ed license, there would be K-9 would be elementary, collapsing some of the content areas, that kind of thing.
So if you have a license to teach English, their goal is to allow that teacher to teach math.
There is some desire to loosen those flexibilities. Yes.
Well, that certainly makes sense.
Nisa, do you want to talk about that at all, or any other things from your working group, staff issues? I mean, this is all in response to, there's a lot of political things going on in play. I guess I'll say that.
So what about
Are you all?
language? If you're licensed to teach French, does that mean you can teach Spanish or, my favorite is Hebrew. So, even though you don't know the alphabet, or Chinese or Japanese?
Again, this isn't part of the law. They just told me off the cuff that there was a desire to move away from this. So yeah, I think the answer to your question is probably yes, although I am not an expert and it is not actually, nothing was actually done yet.
You're an educator, not a content.
Yep. Yep. You guys okay over there?
Right.
All right. So that's all for politics. Everybody stand up, take a deep breath. I'll take a deep breath too. It's cold in here. Jane will work on that. Let's talk a little bit. Someone asked me, tell us a little bit about how mediation fits into the larger dispute resolution picture. Was that you?
No, it wasn't me.
I don't remember who that was. It's a great question. And I was really excited to hear that Jane was going to send you some of the PowerPoints from earlier this week. That Patty Williams gave a presentation on Tuesday about the other dispute resolution systems, and Patty Engel gave a great presentation about due process on Monday. I think those things will really help you if you want to dig into those a little bit. But there is no visual of this process. That was a fabulous idea, and I'm really excited about thinking about that as a project. But it doesn't exist now. Maybe it'll exist later. I love visuals, which you'll see in a little bit. But in terms of, I think the question more came from, let's say we go to mediation, and let's say we're not able to get a written agreement. What happens then? And the answer to that question is, it's up to the parties to decide what happens next, really. If there's no written agreement, they could choose to resolve the problem informally. I would say, my guess is that's pretty unrealistic if they weren't able to come up with a written agreement in mediation, right? But maybe, I don't know, it's possible. Patty, do you have any thoughts? Does that happen?
As you say, if we couldn't do it in mediation, and sometimes if we got 90% of the way there in mediation, sometimes we could, figure out those last few pieces over time. Sometimes we just need
time.
Yeah.
Needs to
little separation,
Just time.
little time, then maybe we can reach out to each other and
Resolve it
tackle
informally.
those last couple. But I cannot imagine if you walk away with no agreement on any of the issues, how you can, get the job done.
Yeah.
With mediation.
Yeah. So that's a possibility, although it sounds like it's not super likely, right? So if you aren't able to get a written agreement at mediation, what's another option? The IDEA state complaint process. And sometimes the cases that you see are actually, they already filed a complaint, right? And so we put the complaint on hold or in abeyance while the parties try mediation. And then at that point, again, Jane stressed this really nicely on Tuesday. Jane does not communicate that to me. I'm a complaint investigator. I wear that hat sometimes. And when I get a phone call, one of the first things that I talk to complainants and districts about is, have you thought about mediation? Are you willing to try mediation? And I would say, I've been on a hot streak lately. I would say at least 50% of my complaints lately, that's just my experience anecdotally, have gone to mediation. But then at the end of mediation, whether they have a written agreement or they don't, Jane does not report to me. I do not call Jane and ask her. It's up to the parties to report back to us. And I want both of the parties to report back to us in one way or another. So this did actually happen. I had never had a complaint that ever did this before, but within the past year, I had a complaint, and then it went to mediation, and then it failed, and the parties contacted me, and I started my complaint investigation process again, and then it went to due process, right? So it's kind of like boop, 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 all over. But it's really, really important for you to know as the mediators that would really help the parties and really help Jane and really help me, is please tell your parties to call DPI and fill them in on where you're at. Because sometimes I'll pick up a complaint decision at that point and investigate it for procedural things at that point.
So there is no, on your end, there is no formal process for getting back to you?
I call them and bug them. But that's about it. Yeah, Renee?
I was just gonna mention, where's Tom Lee? Where's Tom?
Tom stepped up.
Oh, I'm gonna say nice things about him, he's gonna go. So, Tom did this really great thing one time in a mediation that I just wanted to mention when you said, like, does it ever resolve? It was, like, really, really contested. It was a discipline case. I mean, I think there was, like, a pending expulsion. And Patty wasn't, it was a DRW case. And Tom, like, planted a lot of seeds for people. It didn't resolve. He knew it wasn't gonna resolve that day. There was never any written agreement, but the seeds he planted helped them later on to resolve it informally.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to mention that because it was a success. I wish we could report it that way. But anyway, it's an example of what someone can do, even if there's nothing.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that perspective. Thank you. I will say too, you know, all the seeds that you plant and all the people that you talk to are huge. And you don't always see it, but down the road, someone else. I feel that way too sometimes with my complaint work, or even when I just get a phone, because you know we take calls from parents every day, just like the other organizations in this room. And sometimes the parent's not ready to hear, or the district's not ready to hear the answer I have to give them, but maybe they are just thinking outside the box a little bit differently. And in a couple months, they're gonna think differently. Tom, you missed all your compliments. Renee was just explaining how you did a really nice job planting a seed for districts and for families. So that's a really important role that you all play. People sometimes cycle back, right, to information that was shared earlier. And then the last one I would say is due process hearing, right, which Patty Williams talked a little bit about and Patty Engel spoke about on Monday. You know, there's always the chance that if you don't have a written agreement that, you know, the district or the parent or the family or the, you know, I guess it would be the parent in this case, whoever the parent is under the law, could file a due process request. And then that would go to the Division of Hearing and Appeals, okay, which is not part of DPI. We have that same distance that we have with the mediation project.
And then they assign an administrative law judge. Again, the parties are responsible for letting them know if they're using mediation. And then the judge, just like DPI, will usually set it in advance to see if it's resolved in mediation.
So I don't know how I visually depict all that. I'm going to wrap my head around that. Yes.
Do you guys must coordinate the parent that does the mom, does the idea, like, and then the process.
Yes, that's a great question. So if a parent files a due process hearing request and an IDEA state complaint at the same time, the IDEA state complaint goes on hold in abeyance, pending the due process. And then same thing, when the due process hearing concludes, either parts come back to the complaint that weren't resolved in the due process and we investigate those, or if it's all resolved, the IDEA complaint is closed at that point. They're kind of another level up, so we have to wait for them. They don't have to wait for us. Does that make sense?
Jane must figure it out, but sometimes, like the one, I have it at the, they do both of them,
Mm-hmm.
different points in time, and
Mhm.
they're wrapped up into one.
Mhm. It gets complicated really quickly. This is also why I say whenever I talk to a parent or a district on the phone, I encourage them, they have the right to do any or all at the same time, but I encourage them to focus on one and pursue that, and then focus on another one and pursue that, because it can get really it must be a full-time job to try to pursue a bunch of stuff at one time. It would be overwhelming.
This is where they're both filed though,
Mm-hmm.
and then they both get withdrawn. There's
Is there no cost to filing a complaint? And is there no cost to filing a due process request?
Great question. There is no cost to filing a complaint. Taxpayers pay my salary. In terms of a due process hearing, state law says that the district pays the cost of a due process hearing. Correct? Right? I think so, yeah.
It doesn't matter who's held responsible at the end, they always pay for it.
I believe so.
That's a big incentive to try mediation.
So there's not a filing fee, that was your
Okay.
question.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
filing fee,
Uh-huh.
but the district pays the costs. So for a due process hearing, so that's the administrative law judge, the court reporter, those transcripts can be expensive.
Uh-huh.
What other
Yeah.
costs remain?
Their lawyer.
So the point of.
Experts
Uh-huh.
are very expensive.
Sure, but the parents bear those burdens also, those.
Right, oh, yeah,
fees.
yeah, that's right.
You know,
that's
those
not-
are,
right.
you're on
Yeah,
your
but that
own.
are only for the district, yeah, those are the ones.
So if they have their own attorney, the parents pay for that.
Right. On Monday, we had talked about there are provisions to get reimbursement if the parent is a prevailing party, reasonable attorney's fees.
Goes the other way too. But
I'm so glad to have so many amazing colleagues in the room.
So Jane, by way of incentive for the parents, or for the parties in general, I mean, at the due process hearing juncture, don't they sort of lose some of the control of the substance of the outcome?
Yeah, so we have that chart we sometimes use where you go down, what are your options for dispute resolution in Wisconsin? You start with informal, IEP facilitation and mediation, then the complaint and the hearing, and then civil litigation. And the further you go down, the less control you maintain. So that's when I talk to families, that's one of the benefits, and districts, the benefits of mediation is you retain that control over process and outcome. So that is another huge benefit.
And just content too. I talk to them a lot about content, right? A lot of times when we have disputes, it's much larger than special education. And if I'm looking at an IDEA state complaint, I can only look at the things that I'm allowed to look at under state and special and state and federal special education law. Similar in a due process hearing, there are certain laws that govern what they can get into and what they can't. I don't like this teacher is not something that I have any oversight over. So we talk about that very candidly.
Well, that's always the advantage of self, there really are no limits. The
Right.
limits are the limits of the parties themselves, but on what we're going to talk about, and not what we're talking about. So, I think in most due process cases, I've been involved with their mediation first, and it comes all of those issues. For some of us in this room who lay arbitration, remind the party that, settle it now and you'll know what the outcome is when we leave here. Or you can turn it over to the meeting, you'll know what the outcome is when we get the decision. And it's much better to keep control of the outcome.
So Sue, did you ask this question? Does that help?
It does, thank you.
Good, great. All right, I'm gonna move on. You guys are gonna see my geekiness. All right, so I passed out 2 timelines. It's double-sided. We had talked about this a little bit with the other group. Either on Monday or Tuesday this came up. Someone had said, is there like a visual that just shows all of this stuff? And so these are 2 visuals. The first one we call the evaluation timeline. And this has existed, actually, DPI created this a number of years ago. But it's been updated just to fit. We have all this branding stuff we're doing. So now it's in the right colors and the right font. Our graphic designer helped me because I can't do all this stuff on my own. So that's one of the changes, but there are a couple other little changes, like we added that last up to 30 calendar days bracket, just to remind people of that timeline. So there's a couple little substantive changes, but basically, you get a referral or a notice initiating evaluation. The IEP team has to review existing data after the notice is sent or given and before the consent or notice is given. So this goes in order, right, from left to right. Then you'll notice there's kind of those 2 top boxes or the bottom box. That means there's 2 paths. They could either do the top path or the bottom path. So if their IEP team reviews existing data and determines that they have enough data to proceed, they would follow the bottom path. I would say that's probably a little less, I don't know, I have no perspective. Probably a little less likely. It's the top one that I would say is probably more common, which is why it's on the top, where they would request parent consent for additional assessment. So they have to do that referral received between this and this. They have to do one of these within 15 business days. Okay, and we've defined business day down here. It's a little different than calendar day. 10 minutes, awesome, thank you. Then they request the parent consent. Parents have an unlimited amount of time between these 2 things. Do you notice that? There's no time limit on how quickly the parent has to return it, consent. But I would encourage districts, if you're not hearing from parents, follow up, make sure they got it. Then within 60 calendar days from receiving the parent consent or the notice, I need to fix that bracket a little bit, they have to determine eligibility, whether or not a student is eligible under IDEA. And you'll notice that sometimes, even though they don't have to, IEP is also written at this eligibility meeting and placement's also determined. But they also have an additional 30 calendar days to do that. So this is just kind of a timeline to give you a big picture view. Yes.
I'd like to acknowledge at this point the contribution of Bill Houlihan, who is DPI contractor in 2007, bring a group of educators, a group of parents, to realign IDA 2004 with Wisconsin Chapter 115.
Okay.
And this is the outcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill.
You all?
This is your baby. I'm just the foster parent. All right. And then if you flip that evaluation timeline over, you'll see something similar. This just gives more meat around IEP and placement development rather than evaluation, okay? So if you're gonna have an IEP, you have to contact the parents and arrange a mutually agreed upon time and place for the IEP meeting, send the notice of the IEP meeting. That's a weird box there. IEP team meets and determines placement, and then it has the 30-day reminder underneath, 30 calendar days. Then you have to provide the parent with a notice of placement and a copy of the IEP before it's implemented. Then it's implemented. And the requirement there is that they have to have an IEP in place for each student at the beginning of each school year, and it can't lapse. We talked a little bit about that on day 1 too. And then you have to periodically review and revise as appropriate. It has to be done once a year, which we've talked about on Monday, annually, right? But it can be more often if necessary, which is why it says periodically and as appropriate.
Either the parent or the school can ask for revision.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Christina, just to make clear,
Yep.
that sequence is what currently school districts are responsible to proceed as they develop an IEP. They have to send a notice and invite parents to an IEP meeting. Once they have agreed with the parents, what is the appropriate time for the meeting?
Yep. Yes, Sue.
And we say an appropriate time for the meeting, so the case that I called about, the parent, in my opinion, purposely took 3 months to schedule.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a rub in the law there. So we say districts have to meet annually. Have to meet annually. Even if they can't be completely mutually agreed. They have to, they're required. So this is where districts have to sometimes decide, am I going to, in good faith, violate a timeline? Or am I going to hold the timelines that are in the law? It's a tricky one for districts, for sure, and parents and families, because there can be really legitimate reasons why they might need to reschedule.
I guess I'm just gonna weigh in. My experience is that districts do not wait. They are, the ones that I've had dealt with are very cognizant of the 1-year anniversary, and they need to make several attempts at trying to get their parents, but then they hold that IEP. Renee, what?
I think it's because they have your counsel. The parents have your counsel. You counsel the parents to come to the meeting, to co-op, to be present.
I see.
So if someone's unrepresented and they don't have assistance and they're upset, or they don't understand the meaning of it, or whatever, and they don't have help, then sometimes, or whatever, then there's sometimes the district will make a call between, do I blow the timeline, or do I try to get the parents to the table? It's a tough call.
It's a really tough call.
I mean, so what I've seen is district goes ahead and does their IEP within the 1 calendar year, but says, we're happy to reconvene when
Yeah,
you.
and that's ideal, but the problem is sometimes the parent will be so upset by the idea that there was a meeting without the parent to maintain the timeline, that sometimes they'll make a decision to blow the timeline and try to save the relationship.
And what happens if the meeting is, for good reason, the district agrees to push the meeting ahead? The following year, the district has to go through a self-assessment. Their ad hoc committee reviews IEPs and sees that the date of the 2 meetings is more than a year. That's a violation of
Right.
the district.
Right, yeah, and they'll knowingly, like Christina said, they'll knowingly say, I got these 2 choices.
Yep. I had
So it
experience.
happens, should it happen, that's, yeah, that's a question.
Yeah. This is meaty stuff. So I'm so glad Nissan segued into that. I wanted to share one last thing with you. Patty Williams spoke of this a little bit on Tuesday, but this is the first year of our new monitoring system. We monitor every school district in Wisconsin once every 5 years. Milwaukee gets every year. And this is a visual that will give you kind of the 10,000-foot view of what districts that are in that year of monitoring are doing. Okay, so they're getting their records ready, they're meeting with community members, they're doing training to make sure they're ready, they are reporting their results, and then they are making corrections. And DPI partners with them to supervise those corrective activities and make sure they happen. And that's really all you need to know. I just wanted you to know that this exists. Okay? All right, so any other questions? That's the end of my, it's amazing how you can take up an hour and a half without even planning. Any questions, any concerns, anything I didn't cover? Those are my kiddos. Second grader and a 4Ker. Sam and Emerson. Anything else?
Okay, we're gonna take a break,
Yes?
and then Mary's gonna be up.
Yeah, 15, we're gonna take 15 minutes.
15-minute break, so come on back at,
Thank you.